Before we begin, a quick message from our sponsors. Your support helps us keep bringing you new sleep stories for free. You won't be bothered by any ads once the story begins.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, where the night opens gently and every breath can become a little softer than the one before. Tonight you are invited aboard an evening ferry that slips through silver mist toward a quiet place called Lake Haven, where lanterns glow beside still water and every sound seems made for rest. Settle in now, wherever you are. Let your body find the shape of comfort. Feel the surface beneath you holding you without effort. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your hands rest. Let your jaw soften as though the day has been quietly set down beside you, and there is nothing more you need to carry. Take a slow breath in, as if you are breathing in the cool, clean air that rises from a lake at dusk, and let it go, as if the mist itself is carrying away the last small worries of the day. Again, breathe in gently, breathe out slowly. There is no need to force sleep. There is only the calm movement toward it, like a ferry crossing darkening water. The evening is beginning. The sky is dim and pearly, brushed with the last traces of rose and lavender. A wooden dock stretches into the lake, damp with twilight, its planks cool and smooth, beneath quiet footsteps. Far out beyond the reeds, mist gathers in long, drifting veils, softening the edge of everything it touches. And now, as your breathing settles into an easy rhythm, the story begins to drift away from you, becoming lighter, gentler, easier to follow. It belongs now to a traveler, and there is nothing for you to do except listen, rest, and let the ferry carry the night onward. The traveler arrived at the lakeside village just as the lamps were being lit. All along the shore, small houses leaned warmly toward the water, their windows glowing with amber squares of light. The roofs were dark with evening dew, and smoke rose lazily from chimneys, curling upward before dissolving into the gathering mist. The village was quiet in the way that only a lakeside village can be quiet. Not silent, but filled with soft and separate sounds. The murmur of water against stone, the creak of moored boats, the whisper of reeds moving together in the breeze. The traveler walked slowly down the sloping lane toward the ferry dock. On either side of the path, gardens had folded themselves into dusk. Lavender bowed beside low walls. Ferns trembled faintly beneath the weight of silver droplets. Somewhere behind a gate, a night-blooming flower opened its pale petals, releasing a sweetness so delicate it seemed more remembered than smelled. At the foot of the lane, the dock waited. It reached out into the mist like a simple promise. At its far end, tied with a thick, weathered rope, was the evening ferry. It was not a grand vessel, nor did it need to be. Its hull was painted a deep blue that had faded in places to the color of old slate. Along its rail hung small glass lanterns, each one cupping a steady golden flame. Their reflections trembled in the water below, long and wavering, as if the lake had lit lanterns of its own. A ferryman stood near the gangplank, winding a rope with impatient hands. He wore a dark wool coat and a cap pulled low against the damp evening air. His beard was silver at the edges, and his eyes held the mild, unhurried look of someone who had spent a lifetime crossing water at dusk. He nodded as the traveler approached. No words were needed at first. The traveler stepped onto the ferry, feeling the gentle shift of the boat beneath the feet, a floating softness, a slow acceptance. The boards of the deck were worn smooth by many years of quiet crossings. There were benches beneath a small covered awning, and the traveler chose one near the side where the lake could be seen through the lantern glow. A few others had already come aboard. An old woman sat with a woven basket in her lap covered by a blue cloth. From beneath it came the faint scent of warm bread. Near the bow, a young musician held a small stringed instrument against her chest, her fingers resting but not yet playing. A boy in a green scarf leaned sleepily against his mother, his eyelids already heavy. A large dog lay at their feet, nose tucked beneath its tail, breathing in a slow, steady rhythm. The ferryman untied the rope. The gangplank was lifted. The last sound of the shore was the soft knock of wood against wood. Then the ferry eased away from the dock, so gently that it seemed at first not to move at all. The village began to recede. Lanterns along the waterfront blurred through the mist, their golden points stretched and softened, becoming stars that had drifted down to rest close to the water. The muffled sounds of the village fell behind. A door closing, a distant laugh, the faint ring of a bell from somewhere up the hill. Soon even those sounds faded, and only the lake remained. The ferry moved slowly, drawn onward by a quiet engine hidden below and by the old currents that knew the route by heart. The water parted at the bow with a silky hush. Along the sides it whispered and lapped, touching the hull, sliding away, returning again. The traveler watched the surface of the lake, dark now but not black. It held the last light of the sky, a deep, gentle blue, like velvet folded over silver. Mist drifted everywhere. It rose from the water in pale layers, moving without hurry. Sometimes it opened, revealing a glimpse of distant shore, a stand of pines, a leaning willow, a pale rock shining beside the lake. Then it closed again, soft and complete, turning the world into something dreamlike and kind. The ferry entered that mist as though entering a quiet room. The ferryman stood at the wheel, looking ahead with calm attention. He did not appear to be steering by sight alone. Perhaps he knew the hidden shapes of the lake, the slow curve of the channel, the sleeping sandbars, the marker stones that rested just beneath the surface. Perhaps he listened to the water. Perhaps the ferry itself remembered the way. A bell hung near the bow, small and dark, and every so often it sounded once, not loudly, just a low, rounded note that moved into the mist and came back softened, as though the evening had answered it. The traveler breathed in the cool lake air. It smelled of rain, reeds, old wood, and the faint mineral freshness that rises from deep water. The air touched the face like a damp silk scarf. It settled on the hair, on the sleeves, on the lashes. It made every lantern flame appear surrounded by a glowing halo. After a while, the musician at the bow began to play. The melody was simple, a few notes, quiet and clear, repeating with small variations like droplets falling into a pool. The sound did not disturb the silence. It seemed instead to reveal it. The notes drifted over the deck, mingling with the hush of water and the low turning of the ferry's engine. The sleeping boy leaned more deeply against his mother. The dog sighed. The old woman with the basket smiled to herself and closed her eyes. The traveler listened. There was something in the music that felt familiar, though it was not a song the traveler remembered hearing before. It had the shape of evening in it. It had the pace of walking home through dim lanes, of lamps appearing one by one, of a kettle beginning to sing in a warm kitchen. It had the feeling of being expected somewhere safe. The ferry continued into the mist. Behind it, the village disappeared. Ahead, Lake Haven waited, though it could not yet be seen. The name itself felt restful, like a place made from shelter and water and the last light of day. Those who lived beside the lake spoke of it softly. They said the haven rested in a sheltered curve of the far shore, where the wind rarely rose, and the moon often laid a shining path across the bay. They said the houses there were built close to the water, and at night their lamps shone downward into the lake until the whole harbor seemed full of golden reeds. The traveler had never been there before. There had been many roads earlier in the journey, and much weather, and many thoughts that had moved quickly and then vanished. But now there was only this ferry, this soft crossing, this steady movement through mist. The traveler felt the day loosening from the mind. Its edges grew less sharp. Its errands, questions, and small unfinished things faded into the background, like the shore behind the boat. A lantern near the traveler swung gently on its hook. Its flame leaned, straightened, leaned again. The glass around it was dotted with beads of moisture, each one catching a tiny spark of light. The traveler watched them gather and slip downward, leaving clear paths on the glass. The old woman lifted the cloth from her basket and offered a round loaf to those nearby. It was still warm. She broke pieces from it with careful fingers and passed them along. The bread had a tender crust and a soft, fragrant center. It tasted faintly of honey and oats. The traveler accepted a piece, and the warmth of it rested in the palm before the first bite was taken. Nothing was rushed. The bread was eaten slowly. The music continued, then paused, then began again with a deeper, softer tone. The ferry moved steadily forward. The mist opened and closed. For a time, a small island appeared beside them, close enough to see but far enough away to feel enchanted. It rose from the lake like a dark green cushion covered with leaning birches and low mossy stones. At its center stood a single lantern on a post, though there seemed to be no house nearby and no path leading to it. The lantern burned with a pearly white glow. As the ferry passed, the light shone through the mist, and the birch trunks appeared one after another, slender and pale, like quiet figures standing in a circle. The boy in the green scarf woke just enough to see the island. "Is that the Lantern Island?" he murmured. His mother smoothed his hair and whispered that it was. The boy watched it until the mist took it away again. Then his eyes closed, and soon he slept with the complete trust of a child who has heard enough of the story to know that all is well. The traveler remained awake, but softly awake, as one might be beside a fire or under a heavy quilt while rain touches the windows. Thoughts passed slowly and did not ask to be followed. The lake held them for a moment, then let them dissolve. The ferryman rang the bell again. Its low note wandered outward. Somewhere in the distance, another bell answered. It was fainter, perhaps from a buoy hidden in the mist, or perhaps from a little chapel on the far shore. The sound arrived round and gentle, then faded until it was difficult to tell whether it had truly been heard or only imagined. The ferry turned slightly. The traveler felt the shift, a barely noticeable change in the motion beneath the bench. The lantern swayed. The water at the hull took on a different pattern, lapping with a small, steady rhythm. A cool breeze came from the left, carrying with it the scent of pine. The mist thinned for a few breaths. Above the ferry, the sky appeared deepening from blue to indigo. The first stars had come out. They were small and patient, not yet bright, but clearly present. A crescent moon rested low above the lake, its reflection broken into long, trembling pieces by the ferry's wake. Then the mist folded over the sky again, and the world returned to silver. The traveler noticed that the ferry's lanterns did not simply light the deck. They seemed to make little rooms of warmth. Around each flame, the air glowed softly. Within that glow, hands looked gentle, faces peaceful, wooden railings smooth and kind. Beyond it, the mist waited, pale and quiet, never threatening, only mysterious, in the way a dream can be mysterious when it asks nothing but wonder. The musician finished her tune and lowered her instrument into her lap. For a while, no one spoke. The ferry moved on. A heron rose suddenly from somewhere unseen, its wings wide and gray. It passed through the edge of the lantern light, silent as a thought, then vanished into mist. The traveler saw only the slow beat of wings and the long line of its body. The sight left behind a feeling of spaciousness. The old woman nodded toward the place where the bird had disappeared. "They know the shore before we do," she said softly. The ferryman smiled without turning from the wheel. The traveler looked ahead. At first there was nothing but mist. Then, very faintly, a pale brightness appeared in the distance. It was not one light, but many blurred together. The ferry continued toward it, and little by little the lights became separate points, some high, some low, some steady, some shimmering. Lake Haven was near, but the ferry did not hurry. It crossed the last stretch of open water with the same patient rhythm. The traveler watched the lights grow clearer. There were lamps strung along a curved harbor, their reflections falling in wavering lines. There were windows in dark cottages. There was a tall light at the end of a stone pier, warm and amber. Behind the harbor rose a wooded hill, its trees shadowed and still. As they approached, the mist began to drift apart, as though making room. Lake Haven appeared not all at once, but in layers. First came the pier, built of pale stone, wet at the edges where the water touched it. Then the boats, moored closely together, their masts lightly tapping, their ropes creaking with sleepiness. Then the cottages, each with a small garden or a bench or a stack of firewood beside the door. Some had blue shutters, some had climbing roses, now only dark shapes against the walls. In one window, a lamp stood behind lace curtains. In another, a candle flickered beside a vase of white flowers. The ferry passed between two old posts, carved with gentle patterns of waves and leaves. The water inside the harbor was even calmer than the lake outside. It held the reflections of every lamp with hardly a tremble. The air was warmer here, touched by hearth smoke, wet stone, and something sweet baking nearby. The ferryman slowed the boat. The engine softened to a purr, then faded. The ferry glided the last distance on its own motion, as if the harbor were drawing it in. A dock hand waited with a rope, lantern in hand. She caught the line and wrapped it easily around a cleat. The ferry kissed the dock with a soft, wooden sound. No one rose immediately. There was a feeling that the crossing itself had become a kind of rest, and to leave it too quickly would be to disturb the dream. So the passengers gathered themselves slowly. The old woman covered her basket again. The musician placed her instrument in a worn cloth case. The mother lifted the sleeping boy, and the dog stood, stretched, and shook itself very quietly, as though even its collar knew to make no noise. The traveler stepped from the ferry onto the dock. The stones of Lake Haven held the day's remaining warmth beneath a fine layer of mist. Along the harbor path, lanterns glowed from black iron hooks. Their light gathered in little golden pools. Between those pools, the path was silver and soft. The ferryman tipped his cap. The traveler thanked him in a low voice, though the words were simple and brief. Some gratitude does not need much shape. It can pass from one person to another like a lantern being carried carefully through fog. The traveler followed the harbor path. Lake Haven was quieter than the village they had left behind, not empty but settled. Curtains were drawn, fires burned low. Somewhere water dripped from the roof of a boathouse into a barrel with a slow, hollow sound. Somewhere else a cat crossed a doorstep and vanished beneath a gate. The path curved beside the water. On one side were cottages, on the other the still harbor. The traveler could see the ferry now, resting at the dock. Lanterns reflected beneath it. Beyond the ferry, the mist lay over the open lake, hiding the way they had come. There was no sadness in that, only the peaceful feeling that the journey had completed itself for the night. A small inn stood near the end of the harbor. Its sign hung from a wooden beam, painted with a silver fish beneath a crescent moon. Warm light spilled from the windows onto the path. A wreath of dried herbs hung on the door, and when the traveler opened it, a tiny bell gave a sound so soft it was almost a sigh. Inside, the inn smelled of cedar, wool, and chamomile. A fire rested in the hearth, not blazing, only glowing. Its embers shifted now and then with a mild, comforting sound. The room was simple and welcoming. There were shelves of old books, a long table polished by years of use, and a row of blue mugs hanging from hooks. Near the window, a sleeping cat lay curled on a cushion, one paw covering its nose. The innkeeper looked up from folding a linen cloth. She was a woman with kind eyes and silver-threaded hair braided over one shoulder. She greeted the traveler as though arrival had been expected, not in a surprising way, but in the natural way that harbors expect boats and lamps expect evening. She led the traveler up a narrow staircase to a room beneath the roof. The stairs creaked softly. The walls were painted the color of cream, and along them hung small framed sketches of the lake in different weather. Morning clear and bright, afternoon rippled by wind, winter sealed in ice, and evening wrapped in mist. The room was waiting. It had a low bed with a thick quilt, a wooden chair, a washstand with a blue basin, and a round window looking over the harbor. On the bedside table stood a candle, a small pot of chamomile, and a cup turned upside down on a saucer. The innkeeper lit the candle and set a kettle of hot water beside it, then wished the traveler a peaceful night. When she'd gone, the traveler stood for a while at the round window. Below, Lake Haven rested in its quiet curve of shore. The ferry's lanterns were being put out one by one. Each time a flame disappeared, its reflection faded from the water. The dockhand moved along the pier with easy steps, her own lantern swinging. Farther out, the mist glowed faintly beneath the moon. The traveler poured the chamomile. Steam rose from the cup, fragrant and pale. It curled upward, then vanished into the candlelight. The first sip was warm and mild, with the taste of flowers, honey, and sleep. The traveler held the cup in both hands and felt the warmth enter the fingers, the palms, the wrists. There was nothing more to do. The ferry had arrived. The lake had been crossed. The mist remained outside where it belonged, softening roofs and railings and quiet stones. The traveler prepared for bed with slow, simple motions. Boots were set beside the door. A coat was hung on a peg. The candle was moved closer to the washstand, where its light shone in the blue basin like a small moon. The quilt was turned back. The room held its warmth gently, without heaviness. Before lying down, the traveler opened the window just a little. Cool night air entered, carrying the lake's soft breathing. From below came the smallest sounds of the harbor, water touching stone, a rope shifting, the distant murmur of someone speaking quietly and then closing a door. The sounds were not enough to keep anyone awake. They were the kind of sounds that make rest feel deeper. The traveler lay beneath the quilt. It was heavy in the best way, warm and settling. The pillow smelled faintly of linen dried in clean air. The candle flame moved once, then steadied. Shadows leaned softly along the rafters. The round window held a portion of the night, and in that night the mist drifted slowly over the harbor. The traveler thought of the ferry moving through the silver air, of the lantern island and the sleeping boy, of the heron's silent wings, of the ferryman's calm hands on the wheel, of bread warm from the basket, of the bell note traveling into the mist and returning changed. Each memory grew softer as it came. The ferry became less a boat and more a feeling. A gentle passage, a quiet crossing from the busy shore of waking thought to the sheltered harbor of dreams. The traveler's breathing slowed. Outside, Lake Haven grew stiller. One by one, the remaining windows went dark. The last boat rope settled. The inn's fire below gave a final soft shift of embers. The moon lifted higher behind the mist, and the harbor seemed to float between water and sky. And now the story grows quiet too. The traveler rests safely beneath the quilt. The ferry sleeps at the dock. The lake holds the moon in its deep, calm hands. The mist drifts lightly over the roofs, over the gardens, over the stones along the shore. There is no need to follow anything farther, only rest. Only the slow in and out of breath. Only the soft hush of water. The night is gentle, the harbor is still, the journey is complete. Good night, dear traveler, sleep well.